All right, so today's session is about getting started with GDAT, and as it said in the program outline, it is an overview of the tool and using the software, and we're not covering the principles of chromosome analysis in this session because it's actually about the software product. And it's going to be, as Christine said, very content heavy, and which is why we're recording it so that people can go back and have a look at some stuff afterwards. And I'm just going to try and get rid of this. Well, how do I get rid of that? One of the things I did mention in the reminder email was that to get the most out of today's session, you should have already downloaded GDAT and had a go at trying to put some information in it. If you haven't done that, you might struggle with some of the content today, but please bear with us, and after the session, make sure you have a go at trying to use the software and downloading it. So I'll get started. Oops. Making noises at me. Okay, so it is a complex tool, and because we're dealing with a complex subject matter. And today I'm really just going to do a short introduction about what GDAT is. Then most of the session will be concentrating on walking through the products, so showing you all the different screens and what they do. We'll talk a bit about genetic analysis tools and the genealogical analysis tools and where to get help and support. So GDAT stands for, as Christine already said, Genealogical DNA Analysis Tool. It's a bit of a mouthful. I would have preferred a better acronym. I can never say that word because it doesn't really roll off the tongue very easily. But GDAT, and some people call it GDAT. So it's a database developed by Becky Walker, and she's kindly made it available to everyone for free. And it's a fabulous tool for analysing your DNA, particularly at the segment level, which is what we're talking about here, chromosome analysis. Now, the software is downloaded to your computer. And so because it's downloaded to your computer, the information that you put into it is private, and it's not shared with others, unlike some of the other tools you might use. Now, as I said at the outset, you need to have chromosome analysis skills to be able to use the product. It's a very complicated tool, and if you don't have the basic chromosome analysis skills, you'll struggle with dealing with the program because you won't understand how to get around the different functions. And the learning curve can be very steep. I started using the product back in 2013, so I've been using it for a decade now. So it does take a long time, and there's still many things that are a mystery to me, but hopefully I'll be able to share what I do know with you today. And as I said earlier, you do need chromosome analysis skills, and if you've done the webinar series and you've done the chromosome analysis course, you should have the basic concepts to be able to work with it. You need to actually be able to work with spreadsheets and getting those large data sets into the database. So once you've managed that, it's not so much spreadsheet work, and that's the beauty, I believe, of GDAT, is that you don't have to deal with humongous size spreadsheets, and because it's a database, it sorts things into it has its own way of dealing with all that data, and so you don't have to make decisions on that. GDAT does that for you. So in terms of the chromosome analysis concepts, it's really about, you must know how to distinguish between shared matches and shared segments, to be able to interpret when matches are in common with on a segment, and to understand the triangulation concept, so determining triangulated groups and that sort of thing. And really, I find that most people need to have been working at the chromosome level for at least 6 to 12 months, understanding what they're dealing with before they can actually really make sense of GDAT. But you can just, once you've just started, it is a good place to start, because the big thing about GDAT, in my opinion, is that it's a one-stop shop for all your data. And those of you who have done the chromosome analysis course will recognize this slide. The DNA research framework, which consists of 4 modules, which I've got articulated there, and GDAT work together. So understanding the basics, all those basic terminology questions, and what we're dealing with are prerequisites for GDAT. Looking at Module 2, which was all about gathering your data and working out groups, the genetic tools in GDAT are going to be what helps you with that component. Module 3 is about bringing genetic and genealogical tools, and GDAT has some wonderful genealogical tools, but because it's a database, you've got to feed it information. So for those things to work, you've got to constantly feed it information, but I'll talk more about that. So it all works together, and just like with the chromosome analysis course, you've got to start at the beginning, make sure you understand the basics before you move on to using the genetic tools and then the genealogical tools. So you've got to process it in that way. And back in the chromosome analysis course, we talked about the methodology for DNA research, and the same applies when you're using GDAT. Really, you're looking at over at Ancestry DNA, you start with looking at matches at the total centimorgan level, so that you're getting all your high-level matches slotted into your tree. And then when we're working with chromosome analysis, we're working from the segments to the matches, and GDAT helps you to do that. So you'd be also familiar with this slide, which is the slide that Christine developed back in 2020 now, about the DNA research methodology. And on the left-hand side, we've got maximizing this up back to the 16 second great grandparents. And you really need to do that to start with, to make sure you've got a solid base to work with. But GDAT is more useful for working over on the right-hand side, and that's where you get the most value for your dollar in GDAT. Now I'm going to start talking about function keys, and I'll be talking F8, which is where you can look at things by the total centimorgans, and I'll talk about that a bit more as we go through. Over on the right-hand side, we'll be dealing mostly with the function key of F4 and F7, which are looking at segment data, but you'll get familiar with that. So the important thing on the left-hand side is to make sure you've done all that analysis using your biggest matches, so that you've gathered all those matches, the easy matches to find. And then if you've got chromosome data for some of those people, then it's a great way to start off with your GDAT analysis, and then moving into the right-hand side, where you're much more dealing with the segments to find the priority matches that you need to work with. Different approach for both sides. But the good news is that, GDAT does cater for both worlds, the total centimorgan side and the segment analysis side. So what you've got to do first of all is download the software, and that's the address at the top of the screen to download the tool, and it's available for Windows and Mac and Linux if anyone's using that. And you can see there that we're up to 2023 release 4. It's pretty simple to download it. You just click on those links. Once you've downloaded the software, you'll get this screen. And basically what I'm going to talk through is those items that are up the top here, which are the menu items, or called workspaces. But just to remind you, it also says here, it's not just me saying you need chromosome analysis skills to be able to use the product. Becky's also got that on her front page as well. So questions so far?
We haven't got any in the chat box, Veronica's.
Okay, so we're going to deal with 3 different areas today, and the first one, the overview of the workspaces, is probably going to take the most time. We're then going to talk about downloading segment data, and we can download segment data from those 4 key sites. And then we're going to talk about downloading genealogical data, and by genealogical data I mean pedigrees of your matches. And you can get the pedigrees from a number of different places, not just the DNA sites, but other family tree sites. So firstly, part 1 is all about the structure of GDAT. As I said, I'm going to go through an overview of all the workspaces. But then I'm going to just look at those last four dot points there in a bit more detail, because they're sort of the the, the main areas that you would be using when you're getting started. So as I said before, I'm going to do a walkthrough, so it won't be fully analysing things, but we'll try and do as much as we can in the time that we've got. So when we open up the GDAT analysis tool, you'll have at the top of the page this list of menu items that are there, and they're the eight. I think there's eight different workspaces that you have. So you just need to be familiar with what's in each of those. And one thing I'd just remind you all is that GDAT has a lot of things hidden in right-click menus, and I didn't really actually master right-clicking for many years after I first started using the product. So get in early and click away and see what's available when you right-click when you're in a particular area. There's lots of interesting things to find, and I'm still discovering some of them. So the first thing you're going to want to look at is when you open up your database is to actually create a database. And so the file menu is the first thing you need to look at. And this is pretty standard, save as, new database, open database, backup database, etc. So you would just select new database and give it a name, and then click OK. Now, when you're working with GDAT, you're bound to have a lot of issues and problems, particularly to start with, because it can be very confusing. But there's a lot of areas for help, and here's links. This one, GDAT website, goes back to that page where we downloaded the information in the beginning. And then this is the user group and the user group guide. So this is the Facebook group. So they're very useful to click on. And this help, you might not notice this search bar here at the top. If you say key in segment, you'll get a whole lot of other things that are ideas about where to go. So that's quite useful as well. Now, this may look really daunting, but this is the third area that is really the engine room of everything to do with GDAT. And this is where you set your preferences. And I'm going to go through this in a bit more detail in a minute, but just to let you know it's here. And this is if you've got problems with setting up or starting things not behaving the way you thought they would, then mostly it'll be due to problems in this area, that things you haven't got set up correctly. Now, the fourth area I wanted to look at was the edit function. And you'll see here, the main things that you'll use in the edit function are these two items, the profiles and the import templates. And this is really setting up your for your genetic data to get it into the database. So profiles are another name for testers. And import templates are really setting up the database with the different companies, because all the different companies, the format of their downloads of the segment data or matched data, etc., is all different. So you need to have separate import templates for each of them. And we'll go through that in a bit more detail as well. The fifth area is utilities, and this is really about dealing with the pedigree data. Same issues as with the genetic data. Different companies have different formats, so we need to do things a little bit differently. And there's ways to manage the surnames, how surnames are dealt with within the database. And we'll talk a bit about that some more. And the sixth area, which is import data, is really, once you've done this bit down here in the green, set up your import templates, you'll get these drop-down menus. So you can see here that I've actually got all these menus because I've loaded all these types of templates. And when you click on GEDmatch Tier 1, it'll show you all the different sub-templates. So, but this is how you get your data into the database once you've created the templates. And just a tip as you're working with GDAT is that you'll see these little grey areas, function keys and menu shortcuts. Use those, particularly these ones over here, which I'm going to start talking about, F2, F3, F4, etc. Now, I haven't gone through these last three, relative, profile, and most recent common ancestor, because we're going to deal with those more in part two, because they're more using the genetic and genealogical tools. These 1 to 6 are really about setting up. Any questions before I move on?
No. Well, look, we've just got one from Claire. I don't know if you want to take it now. She's using an older version and wanted to know what she could do to update.
Not so much
You
that.
just download.
Yeah, but when I have tried to do that, when I've gone to do that, which you can see where it is, it does kind of indicate that I might have to re-enter stuff, and I'm just hesitant. But
I don't think so. You should.
You don't think so?
You should just download. No, you should just download the new version and then just reopen your database, and it'll open up in the new version.
Okay, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to go through preferences now. And this first area in the red is your source settings. So you should have here, if you're using standardized templates, you shouldn't really have to change this at all. The only thing that you might like to change is these colors. So you can set different colors for the different companies. And you'll only need to change these true and false if you're creating a new template. Of your own, like a custom template or something like that. Now you might notice this AN archive. This is actually an old source name was replaced. It used to be Ancestry, but you may have heard about the cease and desist letter that everyone got about using Ancestry data. So Becky received a cease and desist, so she no longer supports Ancestry, but this source setting is available and it was created for the people like myself and anyone else at that time who already had ancestry data in there. So, and GDAT is a segment tool. So Becky doesn't support it as far as that goes, but there are ways to get ancestry information into GDAT, which we can talk about separately. This COA is an old, it's called Countries of Ancestry. It was a way to get segment data in from 23andMe when people weren't sharing. So it's there for me, but it no longer is applicable. So don't worry too much about that. Over here on the right in the green area are the control settings, and this is where you can set minimums and maximums. And don't look at what I've got here because I change these, daily depending on what I'm doing. And I've obviously taken a screenshot when I had these at 1. You'll probably want to have these set up much higher, but I would go with the default that comes through with Becky. Becky's defaults when you set up the program, but these things are changeable. So depending on how you're using the database, you can change these. And you can see here, I've got skip SMPs under 200. If you had a segment that you were trying to import from GEDmatch, perhaps that might have had a SMP of 100, then that's why it's not appearing. So these can be set too high or too low, which could affect your imports. And there's the following on down. This is a very long list over here on the right. So these are also further down. And so there's a whole lot of other things there that you can use. One of the things I just want to point out is you can privatize all the names. So if you're sharing your screen in our user group, you might like to privatize the names so that those people are protected. Up the top here is status settings, and once again you can change the defaults here to show whether if particular things you might not want to see them again if people haven't replied to you, or you might want to keep them in your match list. So this is a way to take people in and out of your match lists based on their status settings, and we'll talk about the status settings later. These can all be set for each match so that you know where you're up to with analysing particular people. In the chromosome analysis, we talked a lot about false positive regions, and you can add these into the database by clicking this add. I think the default is nothing, but when you're on a particular person, but it has to be set up for each tester. So that's each profile that you set up, but they should appear there, and I think it's a good idea to have them there, and we can talk about why that is the case later. These ones over here on the blue are really just health of the database type routines that you can tidy up things, but be very careful using these because you could lose a lot of your data. So make sure you back up first and then check what you've done afterwards to make sure nothing funny happened. So questions about that?
No questions at this time.
Sorry, you're so quick. You're so quick that we can't get our unmuted before we ask our question. So
sorry, can you just put your hand up if you've got a question? I'm not asking you to unmute. Just put your hand up. Thanks, Claire.
It's all the question of things that have to happen before you don't know you've got a question until the last thing she says. Veronica?
I just asked you, yes, if you just put your hand up, then we'll be right. So you've got a question now, Claire. Yep. And anyone else can put their hands up. Go for it.
Thank you. My question is, those false positive region data points, are they the standardized ones that we can find anywhere? They're not altered by you. They're just the standard ones.
No, they're not altered by me, but you can actually add more to them if you want. So like we've all got personal false positive regions that aren't the standard ones. These are the standard ones, but you can add more too as well. Okay. Don't ask me how, but I know you can. Okay, that's it. We'll move on to editing profiles and import templates. So the edit menu. So as I said before, the edit menu at the top here, the main two things you're going to use are profiles and import templates. And this is about setting up your genetic data. So these are the profiles. So when you set up a profile, they appear on the left-hand side. I've got heaps of profiles because I put a lot of cousins in there. But you can see here, this is me and this is my mum. And to add a profile, you need to right-click in this area. When you first start, there'll be nothing listed here. And you can move things up and down and various options. So right-clicking gives you lots of options, but the main thing you want to do is add a profile. And then when you add a profile, the most important thing is to be able to tell GDAT what you want to add, and you have to set up these profile source keys, and I've got one for each of the sites that I actually import data from, and this is so that GDAT can connect the data that's coming from the DNA company to the correct profile. And when you set up a profile, this is a profile here, Veronica Williams, and this is a match. And so this is a match of my mother, and this is showing that each relative, so this is every match is called a relative, has a page like this where you are able to write notes and that sort of thing. And down here, those source keys are showing down the bottom here. Now you'll notice here that for family tree DNA, there's two listed here. Now, if you've just downloaded from the FTDNA site, you'll get a number like this. If you download from DNA GEDCOM, you'll get this. And but the thing is that with GDAT, GDAT doesn't actually use these numbers, or I think the way the family tree DNA data comes down, it's by name as well. So it can be problematic, and you can't have more than one. It's best not to have more than one for each product, so they should align with these ones that you've set up over here. So you can see Mum's got too many there, so I needed to tidy those up. and subsequently I've now tidied them up, and she's got the 5 or 6 there because I've created one for living DNA. So make sure that these are unique and that they don't have multiple kits there, particularly when they're a profile person. If they're just a normal relative, it's not quite so problematic. So when you've set up, when you go to set up the templates, so that was profiles. The second thing we wanted to look at was importing the templates. And when you click on that, you'll have this screen. And over here on the left, you are able to set up the templates. Now, I would start with GEDmatch if you're just starting out, because it's much easier data to deal with. But the main thing is that you can set up all the templates in one hit. So if you're going to use the free version, you just click on that dot and the templates will be set up. Or if you're using tier 1, you click on that one, and that'll activate, and then you need to activate data templates. And you can see here that I've actually loaded a lot because I use all of them at different times. But when you first start, it's probably best just to load the ones you're using. Don't load everything, because then you'll get confused about which ones you should be using for what. And over here on the right, this shows you, I'm highlighted down here on this particular template. And over here on the right, it's just showing you what it uses to create the data into GDAT. It tells you what the process should be and what keys, what data's coming in on what keys. So these are the columns in the spreadsheet that's provided by the testing company as you download. And so that's what the information is. And once again, when you right click in those areas, you get information about adding new templates or activating templates or removing them. But just be very careful with some of those things. And once you've loaded all of those, once you've activated the template, you will then get those drop downs appearing up here. When you first go to importing data, before activating templates, you will have nothing showing here. But then once you've activated them, you should get the various top level happening. And then see here, this is I've loaded from DNA GCOM. It'll have all these. And then you can start importing your data. So I think Barbara's got her hand up. Barb?
Yeah, thanks, Veronica. Just a quick question about the GEDmatch import. I noticed in the user notes and everything, it's being very precise about whether or not you have a free GEDmatch account or whether you're a tier 1. What do you do in the case where you use tier 1 on and off? Like, should you
Well, you just load both of them.
Load both.
I just have them all, and then just use the one you need to at the time. Basically, right. It's yeah, I don't think it matters much. As long as you can understand in your own head which templates, which, and then what you're using them for. You can see here, I've got them all down here, free tools. I've got 1, 2, and 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 down there. GEDmatch tier 1, but I only use GEDmatch tier 1 because, but sometimes you might want to use these kits, these other ones.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
that's good. Ta.
No worries. No other questions?
No.
I'll move on to utilities, the utilities menu, which is all about profiles and pedigrees. So remember, under the edit function, we had profiles, which is this list of people. So another name for testers. So when you've got your testers in the database, so you've set up some profiles for yourselves and your mother, say, you then want to add in their ancestor list, so which is their pedigree, so that you can mark segments to particular ancestor couples, etc. And to do that, you need to load the GEDCOM, which is under the utilities menu. And when you open up the utilities menu, you need to go to F2 to do the import of the pedigree. And this is one of these areas where you need to right click. You'll get a blank page when you go there, and you need to right click to look at how to import this pedigree. Now I'm using a Mac, so some of the things that I'm showing you may look a bit different in Windows, but I only get the options of GEDCOMS and Pedigree Thief to download pedigrees, but Windows has the option of one-to-tree as well. But don't despair if you're a Mac user about not being able to get one-to-tree information in, because what you need to do is at one-to-tree, you download it as a GEDCOM, and then you can just use the first import GEDCOM to get that data into GDAT. And when you import your GEDCOM into GDAT, it'll ask you to select a person whose tree it is on the left here, and this is my mother. And then it'll ask you, is this person the same person as the profile person? So the profile person in GDAT that I set up under this GEDmatch ID is the same person, and you just say yes. And that connects the two together. Once again, when you're on the pedigree chart, so this is what the pedigree chart looks like in GDAT once it's been loaded, or the ancestor list. So for profiles, they call them ancestor lists. When you click on the right click, you can get all these other options, and you can manipulate this by removing entries or changing things. So it's not hard and fast. One of the things you should take note of is this group names over here on the right, which are the shared ancestors. So it's just picking it up from what you've imported. So Roberts Murphy here, Roberts Murphy. So it's saying the next generation up is Roberts Murphy, the next generation up, etc. So these are the shared ancestor couples. And you'll see some funny things here, like you've got Courtney 21. Often when there's no other person, no other spouse listed, or there are duplicates of that particular name, you'll see the Murphy names coming up here. You can't have two lots of Murphy Batemans, for example. It'll create something like this. So you need to look at this and make sure that, particularly for your own ancestors, that's logical, because it'll become important when you're marking segments. And I've had a lot of iterations on group names, and a lot of changes have been made to the GDAT database. At one stage, it didn't matter if you used the individual or the couple. I used to use the individual, like John Murphy, for example. But now it's best to use the ancestor couple name. And if you go to F8, you can click on the group names and see all the group names listed. And what I'm trying to do is tidy up all of these and get rid of these Rebecca Cassidy's and John Murphy's and use the group names. So it's best if you just keep an eye on that list, and because if you make typos, you might make a typo and you'll have some funny name. Two are very similar, so just keep an eye on that to make sure that your group names are consistent. Yes, so they need to be unique. And when you're marking the segments, you need to be careful to make sure you keep using those group names. So it's just a matter of habit that you'll get into. One of the things you can do in managing the surnames is put in alternate spellings so that the search features looks for those other names as well. And you can see an example there of my Coat and Coates field surnames. And you can see here, when you're looking at that surname list, some clear problems. This is actually a typo where I've typed a couple's name without a space and GDAT thinks it's a surname. So you can go through and delete those names as well. That's really just about health of the database. So in terms of getting relatives' pedigrees, there's lots of different ways you can get the information. And so you can go through DNA GEDCOM, which costs money. Pedigree Thief is free, but it only works on these sites. Wikitree is a good one if your matches are on Wikitree, because you can download their GEDCOMs from there for free. One2Tree only works on certain things. But by being able to download a GEDCOM and bringing in a GEDCOM, you can use Family Search or take things out of your own tree. I often research somebody who hasn't got a tree on any of the sites, put them in my own tree, and then you can export the GEDCOM from your own family history software. Roots Magic is the only place I've found that can actually download data from Family Search. So, questions on so far? No?
No hands up, nothing in the chat, so we're right.
Okay, all right. So importing data. Now, this is really the nuts and bolts of it, and I won't have time to go through all the issues that you're going to have with importing data, but this is the hardest part to get a handle on. And if we've got time at the end, if you're having problems with this, we can certainly talk about it. But in terms of getting your data into the database, the first thing is to activate your data templates so that you actually get those drop-down lists appearing, and that you can actually import the data. And there's a whole range of different places that you can get the information from. You can download it directly from the site. Now, one of the problems that we have with direct downloading from particular sites is often there's no in common with data or triangulation data. Now, FTDNA, as I said before, have a match key issue. So if you download information from FTDNA and put it straight into GDAT, it works, but you may have issues with some of the people. Say you have 6 John Smiths, some of them might not be dealt with correctly. So the bulk of your matches will be fine, but you might have a few where you have a few issues. But you can direct download from GEDmatch, 23andMe, and MyHeritage, all for free. And GEDmatch and 529 Tier 1 and 529 Renew give you in common with and triangulation data. So for GEDmatch, for GDAT to work in the best possible way, you really need to have in common with and triangulation data. You can get away with just having in common with data, but triangulation is the best. So I'd recommend trying to get your data through these sources. GEDmatch Tier 1, as we know, costs money, but you can subscribe for a month at a time. So have a month, download all your data, spend a few months playing with it, and then just do one-on-ones or use the free tool in the meantime. Pedigree Thief is a good way to get your data from MyHeritage. It's free, and DNA GEDCOM is my preference, and because it gives you mostly all those things in common with and triangulation data. MyHeritage and GEDmatch are just out of beta, so I'm not quite sure how well they're being handled, but FTDNA 23andMe, very good through DNA GEDCOM. And the beauty about DNA GEDCOM is that it gathers the trees as well, so it actually puts that straight into your database along with the match if there are trees existing there. So once you've uploaded all your data, the key places to go and look at it are, the first one is F8, which is sorting by total centimorgans. So this particular list shows all my matches, and you can see here that they are going from the highest down, and the different colors are indicating different sites black indicates I've merged them. So it might have been an FTDNA and a 23andMe match to start with, or a GEDmatch match, FTDNA and GEDmatch. When you merge them, they go black. But if they're individual sites, like this blue one's MyHeritage, this purple one's GEDmatch. So you can sort of see by looking at it where they came from. And you can sort your matches by these drop-down boxes at the top. And in this particular case, for statuses, so each individual match can be marked with a status. So you might only want to look at your new matches, or you might want to look at everyone who you know who the common ancestor is. You can select that and limit this list into a smaller, manageable number. The other place that you'll look at data is at the chromosome browser. And this is F7, I think. Yeah, F7. And all these headings are sortable by column. So you can see here, this is my mother and all the matches on chromosome 10. And they go in the segment start order. But you can sort these by centimorgans if you want to look at the highest one at the top of the list. So the common problems with the setup are preference settings are set too high or too low. The toolbar is ticked inappropriately. So you might be looking at a list where none of these are ticked. If you've only got maternal matches ticked, your paternal matches won't show up, etc. Or you might have hidden some matches. So in this case, if I'd clicked hidden, it'll show me all the matches that are hidden as well. But you might have hidden some that you just don't want to look at anymore. So make sure that when you look at this top bar that you've got the right things ticked. And the other main thing that is often a source of problem is that you haven't set the match key. You've either set it to not set it at all, or you've made a mistake in the information you're trying to import. The match data doesn't actually match. So I think Claire has a hand up.
Yep, thank you. Yes, can you hear me? Oh, yes, I'm unmuted. So just in relation to the function 8, the relative list, when I've merged my close family and I have got the segment data for them, it's coming up saying that there is the longest segment is 0, obviously the ancestry part of it. But that's not really a problem, is it? Because I can go into each individual person and the segments are there. It's just on that first screen, that relative list screen.
Oh, this is, yeah, so
where
this
it
one
says
here on the
largest.
left.
Yeah, where it says largest for my close family.
I like this one here.
It says 0.
Like this. So this particular one here in the brown is an ancestry one. So that says 0. So you're saying when you've merged them.
I've merged them with segment data, from MyHeritage or wherever.
So,
and at largest is still coming up as 0. But the segment data is in there when I open each individual person.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a problem.
Probably no, it's not a problem, but it would be nice to have them sorted. And I think there is a routine, just going off the top of my head, that will actually update all that. You know how I said on that preferences page on the left, on the bottom corner, there was a whole lot of database routines. One of them, I think, is to update that figure, but I'd have to have another look at it. So I'll look at that after the session.
I wondered if it was to do with the way I merged them so that the base one was ancestry and it
shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be. Okay.
I think it's just a matter of doing a routine to update that information, but I'll have a look at that and let you know.
My other question very quickly was just around when you showed us F7, the chromosome browser.
Yep.
All right, I just didn't realize you were only showing us 10, because I had in my head that it could show us all of the chromosomes, and that's where I struggle to find the page, if that's the correct word, that shows us the whole chromosome map. And I keep thinking it's going to be on that, but it's not. It's on some.
No, it's
on some
coming. I'm going to talk about that. Yeah.
Thank
So
you,
this
Emma.
is F7 is for every chromosome. So there's a sheet for every chromosome 10, and you can use this little drop down here to move to different chromosomes if you want to look at 7 or 8 or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the next part is about genetic tools, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about F8 and F7, so that might help Claire. Okay, so we're going to go through these items, and I think what you're talking about, Claire, is this chromosome analysis, which is under the most recent common ancestor tab. That's a relatively new thing that's been added to GDAT, which I like. So just a reminder that depending which way you loaded the information, the information in GDAT might be slightly different. So GEDmatch, MyHeritage, etc., they all test different SNPs, and so the numbers that you're getting for your segment data can be slightly rubbery on either end, but just bear with that. I don't worry too much about that. Now, so relative lists, which is F8, which is looking at it from your total centimorgans approach. So they're the main headings that you get when you first look at F8. And you can select to look at F8 by source. There's a drop down here. You can look at those segment groups that I was talking about before by clicking over here. The search function it enables you to look for people in the database. So if you're looking for a particular match name, you might click on search names. But this little blue button here brings up a whole other menu of ways you can search. And I particularly like using search MRCA note because I might have put a note in about a particular person and I want to see everyone who's got that note. But there's lots of different ways you can search. And I always, when I do an import, always look at this view and have a look at where, you know, what I've got by centimorgan. So sort by centimorgan. And what you're looking to do is to get all those big matches, knowing where they fit in. So I get down to this one here where I don't know where he fits in, but mostly those top ones I've already worked out. You can limit it by product. So you can just look at your 23andMe. So if you've just done an import, for example, you might want to look at all your GEDmatch ones, or if you just imported 23andMe, you might just want to look at the 23andMe ones. So it limits that list so you're not looking at lots and lots of data. And the status, of course, and you can select just looking at sides. So if you've done a lot of work on marking your sides, you can just look at all your maternal matches or all your paternal matches or all the ones you don't know. So all the ones with the question marks. Because the main aim of the game is to analyze all your largest matches first. And right clicking, once again, lots and lots of different options here to select. And some of these behave strangely at times in my experience. So always back up before using any of these, but play around with the product and have a look at what it can do. Even have a test database where you just, you know, try and do things and see how it behaves if you don't want to do it in your main database. The MRCA notes can be added here or via the F1 page, which is that relative page we talked about before, but I think I'm talking about that again. And the site and group can be added here or also on the F1 page. So like most products that you use, there's more than one way to do a particular thing. So questions, I think Barb's got a hand up. Barb?
Sorry. Yes, a couple of questions. You just mentioned again there's you can put in your side or group name either there in function 1 or back on the other page. Do that once you put one in there, does it roll over into all pages? So if you put aside someone is a paternal ancestor, does it come up then on all screens?
It comes up on F8 and F1. F8 and F1.
F8 and F1. Okay. So you don't have, once you put it in, you don't have to save it, or do you?
No, it should just stay there, I think.
So you just right click and put on it.
So here I could just change this Cope Bradley one. I could just change that to maternal and a different name. And that would stay there on this F8 list and would also update the F1 page. So when I went in to look at that match, it should be there on F1.
Okay.
And vice versa. So if you did it in F1 and you came to this page, it should show here. Yeah, F1 and F8.
So they're just put in, are they just put in by right clicking?
I think so. I haven't got it open, so yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's really at the high level, right? It's the match. So you're saying that match is a Cope Bradley match. You're not saying each segment is a Cope Bradley segment. That's all in F7. And we'll talk about that.
All right. My other question is the MRCA when there's only one person. So, you know, like great-grandfather married twice, you're only related through the great-grandfather and not his wife. Do you put one name?
Well, can go back to, well, it depends on, it's personal preference really in terms of, in this MRC note, that's really just a note to yourself. So it's what works for you. I know I've got someone like that with John Sweeney, who married twice for me. And I usually put John Sweeney here, 1795, John Sweeney, 1795. But when I go to allocating the segment, I would call it his parents segment. So of course I know it came from him.
That's what I thought.
I would use then the couple up the top for that.
The next level.
So it's, you know, it's really how you feel about it.
All right, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Veronica, we've got one question in the chat from Cheryl, if you can hear me. And that's she's asked a question. My relative page doesn't have relationships in the headings.
Where do you, what? My relative page, this page I've got here, F1, or what are you talking about?
No, the screen before. The screen you had on just before.
Yeah.
Go back one.
You mean this relationship column here?
Right, yes.
Well, you probably haven't defined them, have you?
I'm not sure where you do that though.
Well, you right click and you can change that. So I can't do that because I'm not live. Yeah, you can change these.
No, I don't have the column at all. There's no title.
Oh, well, send me a screenshot. I'll have a look at that. And I'll see if I can work that out later.
Okay, thanks.
Sounds a bit strange. Don't know why that would be.
And Claire has her hand up as well, Veronica.
Sorry, Claire.
Yep. It's just going back to Barbara's question. If you've got an ancestor with two wives and you're only related to one of the wives, surely you'd put the wife you're related to? Even though you're saying that the match is through the Sweeney side, surely at one point you'd be using the known mother, wouldn't you?
Yes, but that would be for matches that are coming from that couple. So that'd be going down a level. But if you're going up a level, so if you're trying to say, well, okay, where did this segment come from? I know it came from John Sweeney because this person didn't share the wife. Then you're going back in time for, you know, further interrogation of that segment area is going further back in the pedigree, not forward of the pedigree. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but it still doesn't make sense that you wouldn't put the mother that you know is the common is.
Oh yeah.
Well, the match where they come from the parents.
No. The segment, it depends where the segment's coming from, because if you've got a match and it's only coming from both of those ancestors if both matches that you're determining that segment on descend from the same side. So for example, this Roberts Murphy one, I know that people are sharing both those ancestors. So if they're only sharing one ancestor, the segment can't be coming, it would be either marked as Edward Roberts or Mona Murphy, because the segment's only coming from one of those people. If the two matches don't share, say, Mona Murphy.
Yep, I get what you're saying now. Yep. I was thinking that for that match data, you could put your common ancestor and the other woman who's not your ancestor, but then it doesn't really fit under the most common recent couple as such. You'd have to go up.
It's about the segment. You've got to sort of be thinking about where did the segment come from, and that's the important thing, in my opinion. So I usually write John Sweeney. So John Sweeney is my one that falls into this category. So I would usually write John Sweeney there because I know that's what we're sharing. But in the couple side, I would probably put Sweeney in, right, which is the wife going back. Anyway, but that's probably a bit more. Yeah, it's one of those complicated things that you've sort of got to work out in your own head what makes more sense to you. But it's about the segment, and where the segment came from is the thing you've got to sort of try and focus on with all of these things. Okay, relative page F1. So with the relative page, what was I going to say about this? Oh yes, so this is my mother's as the profile. So up the top here is the profile you're looking at, and this is the relative. So this is the relative is another name for the match. So the profile is the tester, the relative is the match. And this is just giving you where you can make notes. And I tend to write things here, other things that I know about the person or their tree or whatever. Or if there's particular issues on particular chromosomes, I usually write some brief notes to myself so I remember for next time. The MRCA note that you've put on the particular person also shows up at the top there. This is where you update the status. So you click on this down arrow, and I'd encourage people to use status, just get an idea. They're not, I've just got certain things that I've determined I will mark them because they're not all very useful, I don't think, but a lot of them are okay. So I tend to, when I've just looked at somebody, use reviewed. If I think they're quite within, there's another one up here called analysis. If I want to go back to them, I usually put analysis. So you just got to really decide how you're going to use those fields. The total segments and ethnicity are showing in that area there. And this is where we'd mark the family group. So if you mark the family group here, it will show up on the F8, similar to what we were talking about with Barbara before. Another way to get to the search function over here, and those different areas that you can search on are all coming through on the relative page. And this is a nifty thing. I didn't discover it for quite a while. This little plus here will put the date down there so you can write a little note. And this is just the full page of that F1 page. And this is where the notes go in. And this is the way I write the notes. You don't have to write them that way. And that's just what works for me, because originally this is how I was writing them in Ancestry. And when you import information from other sites, often the notes that you've got in the notes field in those other sites will come through here. So that can be quite useful to have a standard that you use everywhere, so that when you import, you've already got the data here. But GDAT recently added this feature that you can right-click in this box. So if the status is an MRCA, it'll add the relationship, and this is how it writes it. John Cope married private, that's my mum, through Veronica Williams. So that's something you can use if you want to. And I have multiple profiles set up for family members, and usually I want to copy that information to everybody. So I have the same note on, say, my mother, my uncle's profiles. So you can right click here and copy this note to all profiles who share that particular match, so that you don't have to keep retyping it. So that can be useful too. And down the bottom here, there's hot links. This is probably one of the great features of GDAT, is that you can click over. So you can click on this drop down to select the source. So if you click on that, it will go straight to MyHeritage. So it's a great way to toggle back and forth between the DNA sites without having to log back in and out all the time. And you can set up an email to send to matches. It's only useful for GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA where we've got email addresses, but you can have a standard template that's sort of already typed up. I've got this, and then I just amend various components depending what match I'm writing to. And the match keys, of course, are in the bottom right-hand corner, which we talked about before. Any questions on that?
No questions in the chat and no hands up, so. Right.
Okay, all right, chromosome browser, function 7. So this is where we're looking at segments and specifically by chromosomes. So this is really the nuts and bolts of where you're going to be working most of all. And you can see there that I have a number of segments, and 2 are marked to the maternal side, 1 we don't quite know. So, but this yellow indicates that it's a new match, and that's something you can set up in preferences. You can also limit the screen to be showing certain levels. So if you've got a whole heap of matches that you haven't looked at, you might want to just show all those over 30 and work on those first, and then slowly move down the list if you're looking for a particular ancestor or it's a particular focus for you. You can limit the page by site once again, so you can just look at the MyHeritage matches or the FTDNA matches. And a reminder that to be mindful of what you've ticked up here, because that'll either show things or not show things depending on what you've selected. And the page can be sorted by any column heading, so you can sort by side, sort by group, start, end, size, status, that sort of thing. And the chromosome browser at the top here, it populates as you mark known segments. So it starts to color in, and these colors can be changed as well so that they're more appealing. I have done that subsequent to this. And clicking on the chromosome browser will also display subsets. So you might be interested in who's actually in this particular group here. You double click on that, it'll just show you those matches, and we'll remove all the others that are related to other parts of the chromosome. Just a reminder that what's hidden is set up in preferences, or you can hide particular segments. If you mark something as I, as a full segment, then it will be automatically hidden. New matches appear in yellow, as I said. And this one here that's in the salmon means that's where I had my, I had selected that match at the time that I took this screenshot. Now, the default view in this area over here is the base pairs, so you can sort of see how the segments are panning out. If you right-click, you can toggle the notes display, which means that you'll get what I was showing before. Now, this is a privatized view, which is pretty gobbledygook. You can't really make much sense of that. But if you look at my non-privatized view, I prefer this because I can sort it, so I can actually sort by MRCA notes, which is why I've got the Arn and Tafel numbers there, so that I can look at all the matches that it might be on this particular ancestor, which is my Cassidy line, that sort of thing. So you can see here we've got 2 new matches on this page. When you start to look at these lists, eventually you'll start to see patterns emerging. And if you right click on this page, you'll get this other menu. And this is where you can do a lot of more of your chromosome analysis work. looking at triangulations, common segments, and that sort of thing, overlapping segments. But remember, you really need to be mindful of what data you've loaded. These things aren't of any use, particularly triangulations. If you haven't loaded triangulation data, nothing's going to be there. You've got to remember that it's only dependent on what you've already loaded. So you have to have loaded triangulation data from GEDmatch, etc., for it to actually appear in any of these things. So you've got to keep your head around, you know, where you're up to with your imports to know. I know that I've got no triangulation data FTDNA because I haven't been able to load any for ages. So I know I've got to keep that in mind. Whereas GEDmatch, yes, I have got triangulation data. So that sort of thing. And the other thing you can do from this screen is when you right click, you can mark the displayed segments or selected segments. Now this again can play up, so make sure you, well, I think it plays up. Make sure you back up before you use these particular tools, because it might accidentally mark a lot of different segments. When you've marked something with an MRCA, it'll appear in bold. And you can see there's a lot of these that I know who the MRCA is, but I haven't gone in and marked it. This is my aunt, so she's clearly correct. So I should go in and mark all her segments. I just haven't got around to it yet. So when it talks about displayed here, it relates to what's on the page. I actually don't like to mark segments on this page. I actually like to do it in F4, which we'll talk about in a minute for each match. As I said before, you'll start to see patterns emerging. So up here, you've got we've got a segment from 21 to 37, which is Murphy-Bateman. And you can see here that that's a maternal segment, and the next one's not till 56. So we've got a little bit of a gap there, 37 to 56, where we don't know what the segment is. But this one's a Murphy-Bateman and this one's a Cassidy-Sweeney. So Murphy-Bateman must end somewhere in between 37 and 56. And we've also got this Roberts-Launden one from 36 through to 69. So on the other side of the segment, it's all Roberts-Launden. So that can give you some clues about how new matches fit in. For example, down here, we've got N. Bennett and M. Constantine. Just looking at the raw segments, you can't really tell where they might fit in. But I've got matches in that area on the paternal side and matches in that area on the maternal side. So it's a matter of looking at these matches to see whether this N. Bennett and Constantine match these people or these people, to be able to determine the side. And what you might find useful is limiting the group view to either paternal or maternal, and then you can sort of see how they run down. And you can see here that particularly in the maternal ones, you know, where Cassidy-Sweeney is starting to fall off. And then matches that appear in these areas, if you know they're maternal, they're going to likely be Cassidy-Sweeney's if they're falling in the segment area here. So it's a matter of sort of using it as visual clues as well in determining your segment analysis, you know, what you decide in terms of how that segment should be allocated. So questions on that? I know we're covering a lot of information here. Nothing?
We don't have any questions or any hands up, Veronica. So.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on to F4, which is all about DNA comparisons. And just a reminder that when you right click using the right click menu in this big white box here, you get all these options. And what comes up in here is really dependent on what you've highlighted over on the left-hand side. So it's the middle box, when you right click on there and look at names in here, depends on this particular segment. So in this example, we're looking at Dubs's segment here, this 33 centimorgan one, and how it relates to the profile person, and this is the profile person up here, and the match. And so if we select overlapping relatives, which is this one here, as we know, it could be maternal or paternal. All it is saying that they share the same numbers. You don't know whether they share the maternal side or the paternal side, and that's a matter for analysis. And you can see here that there's a mix of paternals, maternals, all in the same segment area. The second one that you might like to use is relatives in common with for both Dubs and MR, who is the actual match. So that's Dubs here and MR here. So that's the match. And because it's ICW, it's actually ICW on a segment. So it's the same as looking at your segment data and seeing that they match each other on the same segment, not just a shared match. So it's a little bit different to say over at Ancestry, when you share a match, you don't know whether they share on the same segment. Here, you know they share on the same segment. So this is refined this list. Different people from this list have fallen off. And you can see that mostly they're maternal. So this is probably a maternal match. And then when you have triangulations, so you show triangulations, because this is GEDmatch data, I've loaded the triangulation data into a GDAT, and it's showing that all of these are triangulated. So that means that the match, Dubs and MR are all showing as sharing that same segment. So you can use this information then to look at how that might fit. So questions? Alison.
Yes, sorry, that good. You're right.
Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Sorry,
good.
just had to unmute.
Yeah.
I know this is going to be a really basic question, but it's got me confused. When we're looking at the panel on the left-hand side, and you've got all the names, sorry, so in your example, WV is your tester or the person you are focused on, correct?
That's the actual tester. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
That whose profile is at the top. MR is the person who has matched with that person.
Yep.
So when you've got multiple names down this profile in this panel, is that
down here? You mean?
Yes. Is that where each of those people match with MR?
Yep.
Because
this is the beauty of GDAT. So these people that I've got listed here are all multiple profiles I've set up. So I've got lots. So this is my mother, her brother, me, my phase kit, a third cousin on the paternal side. So this is actually my aunt, and this is why there's so many here. I probably should have chosen a simpler one. But it just goes to show that, you know, you've got all these matches on chromosome 1 and they're all matching in. And so, yes, but the beauty is you can quickly look at this thing, and I can see here, you know, all of these segments here are on the paternal side, and they're all matching each other. You don't have to go and do the multiple queries over in GEDmatch to say, oh, does it match so-and-so or does it match so-and-so, to determine it. They should all be listed there if you've set them up as profiles. But when you're clicking on it, you're only looking at the information for the one you've clicked on.
Yeah, yes, I get that. But what I'm saying is, so that the one that you have clicked on is where Dubs matches with MR or WV?
Yep.
Which one is it?
The three of them. The three of them. Well, yes, because it's all as it relates to WV. So it's Dubs and MR over here. Dubs and MR are overlapping. Dubs and MR have got a common segment here, and Dubs and MR are triangulating with WV there. So often it doesn't really, often the profile person is irrelevant, but in a triangulation, it's definitely relevant.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
And it's about how you mark these. So you're looking at the relationship between Dubs and MR to say, okay, Dubs is getting that segment from, you know, the common ancestor is my mother's parents, for example, in this one. Whereas down here, so yeah, it's how it relates to these guys. This person becomes irrelevant when you've got multiple names down the bottom here.
Yeah.
Because that's me. See, that's me, and that's Dubs. That's my son. So it's Dubs's relationship to MR is Robert Murphy. And this is the hardest part to sort of come to grips with, I think, in terms of marking it. But the couple is the relation to the profile,
right,
and that person.
Right. Okay.
And then you've got multiple profiles in here. But that's what I mean about sometimes this person up here is irrelevant because you're looking at how MR relates to all these other people to be able to determine what your relationship probably is to WV.
Yes, because I mean, I've got first cousins and second cousins and half siblings and all sorts of people in coming up in that list. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's confusing, definitely very confusing to start with. And even now, I sometimes think, now, what am I looking at? And you have to sort of think about it to make sure you mark the right things. But when you go to their F7 page, you'll see, because often what I do is I often mark the wrong side because I think, oh, that's mum's maternal, but it's actually for, say, my son, for example. This is probably not a good example, but it could be his paternal side or something. And you might have marked it incorrectly, but when you go and look at their page on F7, it'll have the wrong things. So you'll think, oh yes, that should have been the other side because it's as it relates to him, not as it relates to me or my mum. Sorry, I probably just confused everybody with that.
Claire's got a hand up as well, Veronica, unless you want to take that further.
No. Probably got a different question, but it's really clear that this is a super, super critical thing to understand. And it is quite confusing with you having multiple profiles when I'm not sure how many Alison's got, but so far I've only got 2 profiles from 2 different sides of my family. So all of that discussion about the left-hand panel is of no connection to me because I've only got two profiles in. But my question was more on the middle panel when you were looking at triangulations and things. So say you've got a person there with a question mark. Say you've got your JBC EV 73 question mark. And it's even the same on the next panel down. So what's your thinking when you see the question mark?
Well, the question mark means you haven't allocated.
Yeah, I know. Yet, so I'm asking you, but what do you do? What's your first next thought process when you see that?
Well, I was just about to say, I just look at that and I would think that, what happened there? Okay, so sorry, I got some funny thing on the screen. So I would be looking at that thinking, okay, so probably I would look up here and it'd be overlapping in that area. And but here it's looking like it's ICW on the same segment, so it must be matching all these other people on that same segment. I've already determined those people are maternal, so he's probably maternal. And I would just go in and have a look at the segment to start with and just double check that, see if there's anything in there. So when you double click on that, it'll open up his relative page. But when you look down here, if you look at the triangulations, he's definitely triangulating. So it's not just a similar match. He is actually, we have confirmed through triangulation that they're all sharing that same segment. So I would mark him as Cassidy Britton.
Yeah,
and in
that was
fact,
my
I know
question.
that this, yeah,
you'd look at it from that.
But I wouldn't be, and I'd probably change the status to analysis if I didn't know where he fitted in. But he's, you know, that would be what I would do.
And is the theory here, I mean, you might think that's not an important match, or you might think it's a really important match. Is the theory here to really try and find out how, to really try and analyze each of these people like J, B, C, and determine if you want to go looking for them in more detail because they are triangulating there? I mean, over 10 years, obviously, you get down to very small matches. But is that your
well, it depends. Well, you're always trying to push back. So this is my island line. So these are only second great grandparents, these Cassidy Brittons. So I would be wanting to push that back. So it would help me to analyze it, to look at it. But yeah, there might be bigger fish to fry. And my Courtney Pace segments are the ones that I chase most of all, because I haven't got back on that line at all. But so it depends what your research question is. It all gets back to your research question, how far back you're going to go. And in these particular ones, I probably would, you know, it's Ireland, it's difficult, it's 10 centimorgans. They're all the things that would go through my head. I want to go back, but it might not be that easy, if you know what I mean. So
that person
I'd be
got
more
a tree.
focused.
And you can tell that person doesn't have a tree.
Yeah, you can, because it hasn't got the line under it. Yeah.
Okay, so you basically,
but you might want to.
I mean, I think you're
basically
you, really. Saying you make an assessment as to whether you put effort into that match now because it's relevant, and if it's not relevant, you just pass it over and move on. Yeah.
So I would mark it so I knew I'd looked at it. So I'd always mark it as analysis or something else, so that all your new matches are just showing as new, and that you're not wasting your time looking at them twice. So that would be the important thing. And then often I don't bother even go looking for trees. So something like that, I might just put it in reviewed and say, okay, I've only looked at it, you know, at a very superficial level, and I haven't really gone in to see whether it really should be analysed later. So that's the sort of way I use reviewed and analysis.
Yep. Okay.
But that's really individual preference. Okay, so we'll move on to the chromosome analysis. I think we're nearly running out of time, but hopefully we're nearly at the end. Chromosome analysis under the MRCA menu. So this is a new feature, and I find it particularly good for looking at triangulated groups. So this first screen here shows you, sorry, I should have clicked on, but this first screen here shows you the maternal side. So this is mum's kit. So this is maternal, showing her mother, Mona Murphy, and the paternal showing her father, Edward Roberts. And over here is the full segment. When you click on this drop-down arrow, you then get the segments shared by ancestral couples, if you've marked those. So these are all the ones I've marked, and you can see them all there appearing in those different colors. It also shows areas where there are no matches or nothing that's been marked. So 95 to 129. And all of these, you can double click on them and it takes you to that segment area on the F7 page. And you can then drill down even further to see who the matches are in that particular segment area. So if that might give you more clues depending on what you're looking for. And you can go along and investigate those gaps if you want to. Once again, right-clicking in that area, you get the chromosome. You can select the chromosome to move around. And if you do it in this gap area, you'll just get this particular menu item. But if you right-click where there's data, you'll get additional menu items. So click around and you can discover things. One of the great things I like to do here is to partition some of these segment areas and label them based on triangulated groups. And those of you who've done the chromosome analysis course will know that I do number all my triangulated groups, and you can see here I've put them into this particular chromosome analysis map. So I can see that I know that these are Courtney-Pace segments. I don't know these ones, for example. These are Murphy-Bateman. It's just helpful if you're looking to fill in all your chromosomes. The orange appears if you've got that false positive region set up in preferences, and you need to hover over this. It'll show here, it's not saying the whole segment area. On this particular page, it's not showing that the whole segment area is false positive. It's just saying that there is some element in here of a false positive region. If you hover over that, it'll tell you what the segment area is, and it might only be a very tiny component of that, or it could be the whole thing, but it's really a matter of going in and having a look. So that's all I wanted to say on that chromosome analysis. Any questions on that? No.
No, none in the chat.
I'm only up to genealogical tools, so we're going to run a fair bit over time, I'm sorry to say. I had a feeling we might need 2 hours. Hopefully everyone's okay with this. It is being recorded, so that's if you need to go, feel free to go. Okay, so genealogical tools. We've covered some of these things already. I think I said at the very beginning that we had 3 areas to cover: relative profile and MRCA, which are different workspaces. But I'm going to work through some of these genealogical tools now. So there's those things we're going to work through. Now, most of you have done the chromosome analysis course will know that we need to be confirming our base with making sure that we're looking at the right ancestors, and that is particularly important for chromosome analysis. And you need to be identifying any potential ancestors that are missing, areas where you've got no matches. And the priority is to fill in all the pedigrees, because unless you've got a complete pedigree and your match has got a complete pedigree, it's going to be very difficult to find the matches. And constantly be looking at your tree completeness. And you can see here that I'm still working on my tree. These numbers change. I do an annual review. It goes up and down depending on branches I've chopped off because I've worked out they're not my ancestors, or ones I've found new ancestors for. So under the relative menu, we have this area where it says Ahnentafel. So this is for relatives. So that means matches in layman's language. And as I said before, bulk imports are the best. So that's why I like to use DNA GEDCOM, because it transfers over lots and lots of pedigree information in one hit. It can take a lot of time to get it out of DNA GEDCOM, but once you've got it, it's very useful. Otherwise, you're doing them one at a time, and that can be forever when you think about how many thousands matches we've got. You load them by F2, the same way as we did for our ancestor profiles. Once again, one-to-tree is also available if you're using Windows. And you can add them manually on that page as well, if you prefer. So that's what it looks like, very similar to how we dealt with the profile ancestors. And you can right click to get more views. You can see the pedigree chart in the pedigree format, and you can keep going. It only shows you up to like first great grandparents. If you click on one of those people at the end there, you can continue to expand the pedigree chart. If you just wanted to look at particular ancestors or a direct line, you can select direct line by right clicking there, display direct line, and you can see those names on the left there are highlighted, and that is the direct line. You might want to choose one of the radio buttons down the bottom to actually limit that to paternal or maternal, depending, to make it more manageable. Any questions on that? Probably not. keep moving on.
No.
Okay, so family comparison. These are some of these very good tools. But once again, reminder, it's a database. Unless you've loaded the information, you're not going to see this. These tools won't be useful. So you've got to get as much pedigree information in. It's just as important as segment data if you want to use these tools. So I've loaded, this is F3, which is showing you what has been loaded for a particular person. In this case, it's Adam. There's no surnames here. Some of these tools are very, you need to have the surnames in there for them to work. And one of the problems is that sometimes they haven't been updated. So when you're on F2, you can, well, this is actually on F3. If you right click on update, you can set the relative list to the Ahnentafel values. So it's actually saying it'll bring out, that is actually saying it'll bring out the surnames, etc., and populate them here. And so if you click on that, it'll put them into that box. And there's also, when you're importing your GEDCOMs, there's this little tick box down the bottom of the page when you're importing your GEDCOM. So make sure that's ticked to get that information in there. So if you've got any that are empty, try and update those. And when you're in these screens, it can be very useful if there is a common surname, because it'll show you the common ancestors that that are in your pedigree with that particular surname. And if you click on one of those, it'll give more detail of the person over here. So that can be quite useful. Alison.
Regions in common, how do you get that to work?
I'm not quite sure from this page, but I am going to talk to you a little bit about regions in common. I'll have to, I can't quite remember about that, but I don't think, it used to populate from the GEDCOM, but I don't think it does anymore. But anyway, I'll show you this next bit. I think merging, before we get onto the regions in common. Merging, there's two ways to merge, from F5 or F7, and this is the chromosome browser. So this is F7. So you see here we've got two R. Robertses. One of the best ways to do it, I find, is to sort that list into alphabetical order, or if the names are slightly different, change the name so that they're the same. And then highlight the two respective matches and right click, and then that takes you to the F5 view, which is another, you can go directly to the F5 view to do it. And then you click merge relatives, and this is the screen you get when you're in M5 and you're trying to merge the relatives. So you've got the two people on both sides. Basically, it's a matter of selecting one side, then selecting the other, and sometimes having to go back and selecting the first side again. And basically, you want the information that you want to keep on the right. So if you've got segment data marked, like in this case, I've got Roberts, Lawn and Mark, and over here I haven't got the segments marked, I would keep them over here. And then, the other one to look for is Ahnentafels. Make sure you have that clicked if this says true, so that the pedigree comes across as well, and just click the merge button down the bottom. So it's quite easy, but getting your ducks aligned so you don't lose any data is critical. So always back up before you merge. So some of the genealogical tools when using analyzing your triangulated groups can be very useful. So in this particular case, you can see here that most of them are Dye-Lorndon segments. You can select the relative matches, and once you've selected the matches, they appear in this salmon color. And you might like to compare Ahnentafel groups. So that's the common ancestor name, so the shared couple names. And so in this particular case, in that group, I found two people who have George Moss and Esther Westbury in their pedigree. And you can see here that that's the group name, so that's the couple name. But this second option here, compare Unentafel surnames, is also useful. And you can have a look here, and you can see the Moss name again. And if I click the Moss name again, more come up. So these are people that have got Moss, but they may not necessarily have Westbury. But it can give you a bit of a clue to see whether they have got a full pedigree, or they haven't researched it back far enough, because George Moss is 1807. Some of these are later. So it gives you a clue, and that there may be something there. Often, if a lot of these people are related, these can be just the same people over and over and over. But it can provide some useful information for you for your analysis. And one of the things I would do is, if you've loaded a lot of trees, you might want to run this routine, which is in preferences, assign group names to all Unentafels. That'll make sure that they actually all get updated. Now, I did this for 43,000. I'm not sure if that's trees, can't be trees, 43,000 relatives maybe. And it took about 4 hours. So you'll need to set aside some time to do that, but it is quite useful because it'll make sure that those tools work properly. And you can also remove Unentafels without parents, and that just takes out people who have only got one person, so they don't have that line underneath them, and you go in and look at them, and it's a waste of time. Locking and unlocking Unentafels so they don't change with imports is a personal preference thing. And this cleaning up location names is very resource intensive, but so I wouldn't recommend doing that. How are we going for time? We're still running late. So so under the MRCA tab, which we talked a little bit about before, we talked about the chromosome analysis tool that's at the bottom there. We've also got these other items and segment MRCAs. Okay, so this is going to show you people who you've marked as having a recent common ancestor, and it'll show you others with that name, Cassidy Sweeney, and who all those matches are that are going back to that MRCA. So it's a good way to see who have I got matching on that Cassidy Sweeney line, or the Courtney Pace line, or the Di line. And so clicking on the drop down, I'd like to be able to expand all of these at once, but you have to do them one at a time, unfortunately. And this is the family group that shows up on F1. And these will only show up under here if you've marked them in bold. So in that example before, where I haven't marked my aunt, she won't appear on this list anywhere. This one's an interesting one, groups associated with most recent common ancestors. So this is about possible connections. And this is saying these are MRCA associated groups. So you've got you've identified MRCAs, and it looks for paths. So some of my relatives, so my matches, have got to this common ancestor of Laundon Smith through these paths. So that's how they came up. So some of these names aren't familiar to me normally, and this is a good thing in that it shows you people who might have those common ancestor names. So they may have only done their tree back to this Jenkins Replinger, but they're actually a Laundon Smith. So it's about helping you find some of those. So these are all the people with the Jenkins Buckler name, and you can see here that I've identified a lot of them as belonging to Laundon Smith. Some of them are still marked as new, and I must have known they were sharing matches with Laundon Smith, but I might not have realised they had the Jenkins Buckler name. So that gives you a starting point that perhaps that's how they fit in. ICW with a profile group. This is similar but different, showing profiles and relatives where you have the same group names but no MRCA. So I find a lot of these are the ancestors where I've got Britain unknown or maiden name unknown for some of these groups. But it's interesting. So it brings up, you know, the people who are matching, and it gives you an opportunity to go in and have a look. So are these my Britons or not? And I look at the family group. So I would go in and look at them if they're of importance to me. A lot of these are small. I've looked at all these because I wanted to see whether they were my Britons from Ireland, but they're all from these other places. So it's a good way to make little notes and that sort of thing. And you can drill down. Often common names like Smith will have lots and lots of them. You may not want to explore all those, but it does show you what can be shown. Now, the region clusters is probably a very interesting area. This is showing you relatives by region. So this is taking out of the pedigrees that you've got loaded. And once again, it's not going to give you anything if you haven't loaded a lot of pedigrees, but you might be able to see a particular area you're interested in. So for Church Langdon, for example, if I click on that, I've got one match coming up, James. It's only 6.9, so I might not bother looking at it. But for example, Middlesex, if I clicked on Middlesex, I've got all of these matches. And this is the area that my Courtney Paces are from, so I'd probably be more interested in looking at these. You can see here that I've already marked some of them as being on other lines. And if when I went through and had a look at all of them, really a lot of them are on various lines. Only 2 of them were actually on my Courtney Pace line, and so I would look into those as being particularly relevant for Marylebone, Middlesex. So it's not working on segments, so you've really got to be a bit focused here to consider whether the segments are applicable to the place. So as we know, a lot of people would be from that area. Any questions of that? No.
We're getting a few people leaving. Claire's got a hand up. How much longer do you think it will be going for, Veronica? Around 10 minutes?
Yeah, no more than 10 minutes.
Righto, Claire.
I'm just looking at that one, the regions you were just showing. And so far, what's happening with most of mine is that the people coming up for the regions are only people that are my known relatives. And is that just because I yet haven't got enough trees in where those
Probably.
places? I mean, I would have thought something had been coming up, but there's just nothing that's not something I've already
It's
looked
also
at.
about making sure that they've written it in the same ways, like it's like it's a database. It's got to be exact, so some of the regions, they might just have Middlesex or it's so it's usually just due to the database issues or not enough pedigrees, mostly not enough pedigrees, really.
Okay.
I would think. Now I've got a little process example which I can go through or not go through. I could probably skip over that if we're running close to time, and unless people want me to keep going.
I say keep going.
Well,
I think people can see it in the recording, if they need to leave.
Keep going.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So let's do it. So this is just really a new FTDNA import. And one thing I'd recommend is if you've got relatives that you're reliant on to assess a match. So for example, if you've got a parent matched, parent tested or brothers tested or uncles tested, that will help you determine sides. Always load all those kits at the same time. Load them all and then start looking at them so that you've got all the data in there. You don't have to go looking elsewhere. So what I would do if I've just loaded, say, all FTDNA data, I would go first of all to the F8 screen and look at the total centimorgans list. And one of the things you can do is right click here and display, and it comes up with all those options. You could first of all limit your list to just FTDNA kits, so that's only FTDNA kits and it's not being cluttered up by other sources. And recent relative ads should show up in yellow if you've set them up in preferences. So you can see here on this page, I haven't got any yellow, so it's quite a fair way down any new matches. That other view there, show relatives with same email, is a good one for identifying duplicates. So if I selected show relative recent ads, you would get this page, a much more refined list, but much smaller segment matches. You can see there, my highest one I think is 18. So I would sort them on that particular page. So I would sort them by largest segments. And so you can see here now that these are all in grey. So these are all new segments that are older than what I've got set up in preferences, which is 14 days. But I haven't looked at as well. So it's giving me higher ones here. So I'm getting 29 as my largest segment match there. And as we talked about earlier, J. O'Brien is one with a tree. And so because he's got that line underneath him, the others haven't got trees. So you might want to just look at all the people with trees in there. So if you go back to right clicking, display, show relatives with an and tafel, it then reduces that list to all of these people have trees. And so it's a matter of going in and having a look and analysing those. But you can see that I'm a bit behind in terms of doing all my segments. So none of those new ones. But clicking on the one on show relative recent ads first is a good way to see if any new big matches have come in. And I'd suggest doing that whenever you import anything from any site, really. And then it's a matter of interrogating using the genetic tools. So I have a number of other case studies, but we'll have to use those in GDAT user group. So just in finishing up, I just want to say that GDAT is a database and it's only as good as what you put into it. It can't give you miracle answers if you don't take the time to load it up with information. And you've got to constantly feed it. You've got to constantly feed its genetic data as well as pedigree data. And if you don't load the right report, it can't tell you anything. Now, to do the actual genetic analysis, you really need to understand chromosome analysis in overlapping segments in common with and triangulation. Otherwise, you'll have difficulty. One thing I would suggest is that to avoid rework is to think about how you're going to use your groups, what status settings you're going to use, and how to standardize your notes before you start, so that you can actually don't end up with a whole lot of mess, inconsistencies in how you word things. It becomes easier to use if you can look down a list and they're all formatted in the same way. And there is a wonderful site, the DNA GDAT analysis tool, which Kathy Thompson writes. User guide, I should say, she writes and maintains, is an excellent tool, and you can get that from the via that through the website, and you just need to get GDAT is the best way to find it on Google. And Kathy comes along to our user groups, which is very useful. We also there's also a Facebook group for GDAT, so join that, ask all your hard questions over there. But we do have a SAG GDAT user group where you can talk to fellow users at SAG, and it's a much smaller group, so please join up that group. And we're meeting for the next time on the 21st of October. And so if there's any things that you would like me to go over in more detail, come along to that session and let us know beforehand so we can cover those things. And the user group, really, I've probably said most of those things already. Same as this session, it's about using the software. It's not necessarily about learning about chromosome analysis, unless it's in relation to how to use the product. And on my Gene Monkey Explains blog site, if you go to the table of contents page, there is actually a whole section of blog posts. The first 3 are really what we've covered today. And part 4 there is a summary of our meetings and things we've talked about. So you'll be able to see a list of things we've talked about there and some links to other resources if they're not in any of those posts already. So thanks for joining and have fun getting started with GDAT.